Welcome to Under the Fig Tree podcast. In today's episode, hosts Reverend Micah Glenn and Reverend Dr. Ben Haupt talk theology and life as they meditate under the fig tree.
What's up? Welcome back to another episode of Under the Fig Tree. Ben, how are you doing this morning, bro?
I'm good. The weather is beautiful.
It is.
And St. Louis in the springtime is gorgeous. The trees are blooming, and our whole campus is just really made for, I think it's made for the springtime. So
I think it is. I feel like we talk about this every change of season, how beautiful the campus is. But it just is.
Yeah.
Like if snow is your thing, when it's like kind of snow capped, it's great. But I'm with you. The spring, because we have like different fruit trees all around campus. So we have fruit blossoms popping off. The different colored trees in their early spring colors are coming out. The tulips are in bloom. My allergies are an absolute mess because of it.
But we have nice weather, and I always have to bring it around to your shoes in this opening bit. So,
sure.
Because we have such nice weather, you have on a unique pair of shoes today. You told me before we got started that they're not new, but I think they're new to the podcast. And what I'm intrigued by them is how unique they are. They have a whole unique lacing system.
Yeah.
And you claim that they're comfortable, but they look like there's something out of Back to the Future 2 or something.
Well, so like everybody now knows that I'm a big fan of Nike, and Nike has a bunch of different kind of sub-brands within Nike, and like this kind of line of Nikes, the claim to them is that they're made with like so much recycled materials. And so I don't know where they get those recycled materials from. I'm sure that they were in the description, but I was more looking at how they look.
Of course.
But they have like interesting soles. And so, yeah, like on the inside, it is like walking on clouds, and the material's super lightweight. This is why I don't wear them in the winter, because they breathe well. And so your feet don't sweat. There's like netting here, but the material itself, you can see my sock through there. So when it gets warm outside.
So what's the official name or the official
I can't remember the
brand?
Exact name, but the line is like the ISPA line of Nikes. So this one in particular, I can't remember exactly what it's called. Somebody.
There you go, viewers. If you want to be like Micah, you got to go out and get you some ISPAs.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, we have a special guest on, and we should stop talking about your shoes because especially
probably doesn't necessarily care for how. I say that, but anyway, she benefits from my love of sneakers as well. But as she gets speaking, you might recognize her voice because this is the voice of the introduction to our podcast. We have with us Deaconess Dorothy Glenn. How are you doing this morning?
Doing well.
Yeah, so about a little over a year ago, when Ben and I were putting the podcast together, we had an introduction for our season 1. Then, like when we did it again, we were like, well, I don't know if that introduction works anymore. Let's do a regular introduction. And we talked about my best friend Jeff, who provided the music for us. He sent us a bunch of samples.
Yeah, so good.
And didn't have to pay for it because he's my best friend, which is always a good thing. He just gave it to us, and then we were like, oh, let's record a thing. But we wanted a different voice than the two of ours. And then I was like, well, Dorothy can do a British accent, and it's different enough. And so let's ask her to do it. Yeah, so we did it in the office, and like I don't know how many times I made you re-record it, but eventually.
I don't think I was there for that.
No, it was just me and Dorothy, and like she did it once, and I was like, but do it this way. I said I wasn't going to be like a micromanager of it, but when you want a thing done a particular way, you do it.
Well, I think our listeners and our viewers are probably very glad that they don't have to listen to us say the word barbecue at the same time. Barbecue.
Oh, recording that was awkward anyway.
So if you haven't been tuning in for very long, go back and have a listen to some of our early episodes on Spotify. It's humorous.
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, so Dorothy is my wife. Our viewers know of you. And in fact, I think we mentioned having our wives on as we were talking about like the guest that we were going to have on at some point. And there have been comments, have Dorothy and Selena on. So
I'm still too chicken to have Selena on, but Dorothy, it's great to have you on.
Here I am.
Very brave of you to join us for this podcast.
Or maybe brave of Micah.
Ooh, I kind of like that.
It's funny, and I don't know if I've said this on the podcast before, but like, I don't know about you, but I don't listen to our podcast.
I listen to every episode while it's happening.
Well, there we go. I don't like to listen to myself preach. Like, it's a good exercise. Listen to yourself. Like, especially if I felt like I've preached a bad sermon, I go back and re-listen to it to make sure that it was actually bad and I'm not in my own head.
Yeah.
But if it was bad, like, just to work through it. What could I have done better? What could I have said here? Just learning experience. But this is less important than preaching on Sunday.
Amen.
And so I do not listen to this. So every once in a while I'll come home and I'll hear it. I'm like, what are you doing? Put on some headphones or something like that. Stop listening to the podcast. Anyway, so Dorothy's a listener.
So Dorothy, I have to ask, are you also a shoe connoisseur?
I used to be into shoes more than I am now. Yeah, I had a pair of heels in every color.
But now the Glenn budget can only handle one person having a shoe fetish. Is that
yeah,
kind of
pretty
the thing?
much.
All right.
She says
This
that.
is going to be rough for Micah, and I think he has shoulders big enough to handle it.
She says that, but like, Dorothy's sneaker collection is growing, and she gets compliments on the shoes that I've purchased her all the time. She has Air Max.
Purchase each other's shoes?
No, Dorothy wouldn't. I don't know. Like, I don't know if you would ever buy shoes for me, but I would like to see the shoes that you bought for me, and then wonder what they would be. Well, anyway, yeah, you see that face. But I buy sneakers for her. She hasn't liked every single pair. One pair she distinctly didn't like. They were dope. Anyway, we'll move past it. But yeah, she has sneakers. Every, beginning of the school year, you buy your kids, like, their school shoes. I'll probably stop, with the exception of David, my son, who's blossoming into a true sneakerhead. Johnny doesn't care. He just wants Minecraft shoes, or it doesn't matter.
Sounds good to me.
Talitha, I'm not sure if she's, like, really into sneakers the way I am. But, like, nonetheless, you pay for shoes, and then they destroy them anyway.
It needs as many sparkles as possible.
Yeah.
Talitha.
I got her a really good pair of Air Force Ones, but I haven't seen them in a very long time. I don't know what that means, but
I also wanted to ask about, I don't think I've ever asked you about this, but I noticed as you were sitting down that you both have the same wedding ring. So tell me the story of that.
Yeah, well,
Maybe hold it up for the viewers
this
so
way.
that they can see.
there's three. Probably this one. Yeah.
yeah. So we got this, I think, 5 years ago now.
It's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah. Micah traveled a lot for work, and with his RA, he had to leave his rings at home and didn't feel comfortable leaving them there for me to look at while he's traveling.
Yeah.
And we are people who love tattoos.
Yeah.
So it felt like that was the move now that his rings don't fit him. And it has a lot of meaning for us. We are bound together in this marriage here, in our faith, but we're also bound in this broken world. And so, we still continue to suffer and we still continue to hurt one another. And Christ bore that on the cross. And so that's kind of the representation with the thorns. Kind of we're bound together, both in this broken world, but also in the suffering that was born for us, so that we can, instead of looking longingly at one another, we help guide our faces towards the cross.
Wow.
I don't hurt Dorothy ever. Anybody? Strike that from the listening. I am a perfect husband. I do everything perfectly well all the time.
Right.
We know what you meant.
Yeah. No, I'm just messing around. Yeah, it was one of those things. I just remember the day, because I still travel quite a bit. My RA is much better now. Back then, I wasn't as good a shape as I am today, I didn't make it a priority. Our viewers won't know, but at one point, not that long ago, just a few years ago, I was like 270 pounds. And I carry it well. So I was able to deceive myself a little bit about my shape. Long story short, though, I just remember coming home and I had put my wedding band one place. And when I came home, it was somewhere else. And I don't know if she like picked it up and carried it and moved it or something like that. But I noticed it and I was like, oh, man, like I'm just taking it off to travel. And then, you think about these deeper implications. And we're going on 11 years of marriage. And early on in your marriage, you want to, guys, early on in your marriage, pay attention to what your wife says and does. It'll help you out in the long run. But yeah, so it's one of those things where, again, we both like tattoos. I know there's other options like those silicone rings that are like $5 and stuff like that. But I'd rather wear a tattoo.
I actually like the, tattoos have this like, if you get a tattoo, you'll have it for the rest of your life. And I kind of like the point of that. Like, exactly.
It's there. Yeah, forever.
It's there forever.
For better or worse, the vows we took. So
yeah. So maybe I'll have to talk to Selena. We're not opposed to tattoos, and I think I don't know if I've ever talked about that I have a tattoo as well.
What?
I've never told you. I've never showed you my tattoo.
Never.
What?
This is breaking news. I did not know you had a tattoo.
Yeah.
I've known you for all these years, and obviously, I'm covered in them, but
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, Under the Fig Tree, that should be our next tattoo. I'm down for it, by the way.
Yeah,
so
that would be a lot of fun. Yeah, it was on a national youth gathering that I got a tattoo. My only tattoo.
As a participant or
as a vicar.
Oh. Okay.
My vicarage supervisor, 62 years old, was getting his first tattoo, and I was toward the end of my vicarage. And I said, well, if my vicarage supervisor is going to get a tattoo, that must be okay for me to do that as a vicar. And so, yeah.
Look at that.
Look at that.
Yes, it's one of those things. And I didn't get it to be rebellious, but then you have kids, right? And our kids both know we have multiple tattoos. And you begin to wonder, not like I'm going to be like, oh, are my kids going to get tattoos? But our kids will probably do the opposite thing. I think about that all the time. Your kids are just reflections of you, but also different in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I mean, my point with anybody that asks what's the theology of tattoos, it's like, well, it says, yes, in the Old Testament, you should not get tattoos. But in the Old Testament, it also says you should not eat bacon.
Look at that.
And I enjoy both, actually, quite a bit. And I think most people that are anti-tattoos probably still eat bacon.
I'm sure they do.
And so if we're going to follow the Old Testament laws, I think we have to be a little bit more hermeneutically sophisticated.
Yeah, and just culturally, Old Testament, those tattoos, the people who got tattoos that they're referencing, radically different thing than any of the tattoos that we have. Right. With the exception of maybe the wedding rings. That's a little more theological than all the rest of my tattoos. So, well.
That's my influence.
Oh, you influenced him?
Oh, to get tattoos?
You had the tattoo first?
No.
Oh.
I think Dorothy, when we met, Dorothy did have tattoos, but hers are all hers are theological tattoos.
Almost
all of them. Mine are.
You have VDMA. That's a theological tattoo.
So on this arm specifically, so I also have a stone cross up here with my parents' name around it. I have Romans 8:31 in Greek on my chest. I have my name in Hebrew on my back left shoulder. It's the tattoo I always forget that I have. Tattoos on your back. If you'll just never see it. So I forget that I have it all the time. And then this side is Hawaiian Beach, LA, the tiki is completely different. And that is kind of by design. People always ask how many more tattoos will I get? Well, I don't have a plan, but I'm sure I'm not done getting tattoos. I just got one last summer. But yeah, tattoos, fun stuff. If you're old enough, if you thought about it, and if you haven't thought about it and you get one, they're forever.
And if you're under 18, by all means, you didn't hear it from us, and talk to your parents and all of those disclaimers.
Even if you are under 18, your body's still going to change so much. What you like and don't like is going to change so much. I tell people under 18, just wait. Yeah. Because even at 18, it's probably a mistake waiting to happen. Well, anyway. Cool. Well, we introduced you. You are a deaconess. And so a question we like to ask all of our guests is, what was your path and what led you to choosing to become a deaconess in the church?
Sure. I didn't always want to be a deaconess. I actually didn't know that they existed. I didn't grow up in the LCMS. I grew up in the Evangelical Lutheran Church of England. And so they don't have deaconesses over there. I didn't know what they were. I wanted to maybe teach music or art. Those were my favorite subjects. And then I moved to America, and which is a bit of a shock with school and culture and even culture within the church. And then I found out about deaconesses because my mom is a deaconess.
Who we've had
Surprise.
on the podcast.
Right. And was she when did she become a deaconess? Was it before you were born?
Yeah, she became a deaconess before my parents even moved to the UK.
Okay.
So that was like 1978 or 80, something like that. Sorry, Mom. I did read the book that she wrote.
Yeah. Right. We talked about it on our podcast.
Yeah. In the Footsteps of Phoebe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was my high school years, is her writing that book.
Okay.
And so we went to a lot of different historical places, even in the Dakotas where there was a deaconess program once upon a time. And then, even then I didn't want to be a deaconess. I wanted to be what I thought was more. I thought maybe, my parents were encouraging me to do that because I wasn't good enough to be a lawyer or a doctor. I happen to have a brother that's a lawyer and a brother that's a doctor, older brothers. But of course, that was absurd. The reason why they were encouraging me that way is because of what they saw in my potential and in my heart. My mom has a story of the teacher telling her that on the playground, I'm the little girl that runs around, like, making sure that everyone else is okay. And if someone is hurt, and I'm the first person to be there and help. And seeing that attitude, they encouraged me to go into church work. And like I said, I didn't really want to. So I started looking at law. I had an older friend who was a parole officer, actually. And I was really fascinated with helping people get back into society. And so then I was kind of looking at that, and everything kept circling back to helping people and caring for them. And every avenue that I looked at wasn't quite the way that I wanted to, or didn't kind of satiate that desire. And so then I applied to Concordia Chicago, because then I decided, okay, I'm going to be a deaconess. And that was the only place I applied, and that's where I went. So I studied there in the undergraduate program with a degree in theology and a minor in psychology. And I took the Deaconess program there has classes that combine social work, psychology, and practical theology to care for the, spiritual care as well as physical care, works of mercy, and teaching the faith for people.
And so just for our viewers and listeners, tell us about So Concordia Chicago has a Deaconess program.
Yep.
That's a bachelor's program, and Concordia Seminary has a Deaconess program, and it's a master's program.
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about some of the similarities, the differences, just kind of spell out how that works between the two programs, what certification is like afterwards.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I can only speak so much about the St. Louis, and Fort Wayne program because with not going through them. I will say in terms of the bigger picture of what certification looks like and degree, et cetera, the certification itself is pretty similar. I mean, whether a deaconess graduates from Chicago or St. Louis or Fort Wayne, they're a deaconess at the end. Mm-hmm. There's no difference in their capability or, there's no tier of, this deaconess is able to do more than this deaconess. Yeah. No, we all receive the same diploma of ability to serve as a deaconess within the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, pending our commissioning, which happens once you get your first call. Mm-hmm. So, then that comes the difference would be that, I left Concordia Chicago with an undergraduate degree. Mm-hmm. Now, I did a lot of theology, and I think it was, completely adequate. And in many ways, there are things that I think, dare I say, on this podcast that were opportunities that I maybe wouldn't have gotten if I had come here, just because of my own fascination with psychology. Now, we have some really great professors here in the practical department that overlap with psychology, and that's wonderful. I don't think that they were here when I went through Concordia Chicago, but not that would have mattered.
Dr. Mars was still here, but Dr. Rockenbach came just as I think I was leaving.
Yeah, and so I really feel like I've been able to use that aspect of, looking at group dynamics and leadership skills, loss and mourning, death and dying. Those are all things that I studied. Personality psychology, abnormal psychology. And I think that that's been really beneficial for serving as a deaconess.
Well, in a lot of ways, I think what you're saying is that studying something in addition to theology has helped in your serving in the office of deaconess, right? So
exactly.
So anybody that is already in a bachelor's degree program that's not theology, the idea would be take whatever you're learning in undergrad and then apply theology to it, pair theology with it, and it makes for a well-rounded church worker, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, going through the Chicago program, it was kind of like the shortened version. I go through the bachelor's program and I get a shorter, well-rounded education. The bonus of the women that get to go to the seminary is you have professors who are renowned across the world in theology, and you get to sit at their feet and learn. I mean, there's so many things that I feel like are just mind-blowing as I'm doing my master's here. And it's not to discredit my undergrad, but it's because it's the master's level. And I'm a nerd, and I want to learn all of these things, which, aren't always necessarily applicable, but in the day-to-day diaconal work. But at the same time, it is because it's forming of the whole view of how we understand what it means to live in our vocation and as Christians in our daily lives.
Yeah, and so because we've had your mom, we had Sarah.
Yeah.
Now I've tried to think of her
We've
last
had Christina
name.
Paul.
Sarah's last name is
Longmire.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Sarah Longmire.
I don't like if I wasn't put on the spot. Well, your mom, Sarah Longmire, you guys are kind of all of the same kind of tree of deaconesses in the church. I know your mom never went to Concordia Chicago. She started Valpo, then went to Ann Arbor, but it's the same kind of. She's from like the beginning parts of the undergraduate deaconess program in the LCMS, right? Yes and no. Anyway, we're just gonna put you three in a box together because that's what I'm trying to do. We've had Chris Paul, we've had Rebecca Lucas,
we've had the students, right?
Our deaconess students.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and that's what people ask me. So again, my introduction to deaconess is we had a deaconess that served at my congregation when I was growing up, but I just never knew, and I never knew her. Well, anyway, and so it was like one of these interesting things. And when I was first trying to understand what a deaconess was at Concordia Chicago and what they did for the church, it's so much. But like you said, like you go to Concordia Chicago, the deaconess is kind of the focus. You choose a minor or another major that pairs along with it. Sarah did education. I think that's a wonderful pairing. I just was having a conversation with a young man that goes to Vocatu who was asking for advice of what to study at a Concordia. And I was like, well, you can do pre-sem, do theology. That's fine. But you could do like pre-sem, take the languages. You're going to have to take all the kind of core theology classes anyway. But I was like, if you compare it with something like education, nonprofit, business management, psychology. That's my point, is that for the women that come here and do their masters, sometimes they've had theology, like Rebecca Lucas. She studied was at CUW, that lay minister program. Or I know of deaconesses that now serve that were accountants before. So they were accountants, came to the seminary. One of the seminaries got their MA in spiritual care, went out and served, but then they have this extra gift. And to have somebody who can be, administrators in the church, 9 times out of 10 are professional church workers. Some of us have talents for administration. Some of us pretend like we have talent for administration and we get along. And then some of us, but like the thing is when you have that ability to actually be a strong and good administrator, but you have that mind and heart for the church, and you pair that together, it's a beautiful thing. And so again, just talking about well-rounded. And so we want to rewind a little bit because it's kind of an anomaly. We don't get a lot of MA students that are already deaconesses at the seminary. So you're not doing like the MA in spiritual care that our deaconesses do, because you looked at the program, you said, well, I've been doing this for the last 6 or 7 years of my life. Not a lack of humility. You were like, I could probably teach most of these courses, just because it's a very practical way of approaching theology and what they're going to do when they graduate. But that said, and you've already kind of talked about the deeper dive into theology from your undergraduate to graduate. What's that switch been like? Just kind of in more detail. Because again, a lot of our students, they might have done theology before they came into the MA program to become a deaconess, but you're just taking a slightly different track, and now you have a different approach to the MA. You have classes with deaconess students, you have classes with seminary students, like all of our deaconess students. But what's it been like to study alongside our deaconess students, where you are and where they are in their education? But then also, what's it been like for you to come in with experience into the MA as a deaconess, where you're not just doing theology, you're still building on your profession as a deaconess in our program?
Yeah, there were lots of questions there.
Yep. Answer them in line, exactly how I asked them. Thank you.
Isn't this fun just to see the dynamic? It's so much fun.
I ask all of our guests questions like that. That's how my mind works. You know this.
Yeah. I'm trying to pick one. So I guess going into classes, it's quite refreshing. Again, I don't know if that's just the nerdy side of me that loves to listen to people talk about theology. But going into Intro to Systematics, a lot of it was a refresher. It's an intro class, primarily for MDiv students, who have maybe never taken a theology class before. But at the same time, I've been out of school for 10 years or however long. And so it is nice to be like, oh yeah, that's what that was, and kind of refresh some of the readings, a lot of reading.
Yep, a lot of reading.
But, yeah. So that's been really nice. I did, have a little moment where I patted myself on the back because one of the professors said, "Oh, like you have really great theology," or something like that in one of my classes. Like, yeah.
Did he say, like, I also have Micah in my class, and you really are a great theologian?
So, yeah.
I'm just waiting for that to happen. When she came home that day, I was like, well, Dorothy, it's like you have a degree in theology or something like that. Imagine.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Got to bring her back down to earth.
Yeah. So, it was kind of like okay, cool. But, now I feel like I'm starting to delve into things as I take electives. Mm-hmm. The intro classes are, to make sure we have everything in place to go delve into those electives. Mm-hmm. And so it's really cool taking classes on specific kind of honed in subjects like devotional life and adult catechumenate, to things that I think, everyone should take everywhere, but obviously that's not possible. So, no, I'm just really glad to have that opportunity. I think what else is unique about it is, I feel like everyone else in the class has a means to an end. They'll become a pastor, or they'll become a deaconess, or and I'm just kind of here for fun. Like, I really want to learn, and I want to write, and so it's been cool to be able to just soak it all up. I think, even though this is my first year, because it's the MA program in practical theology, a lot of the people in my class are actually like fourth years, because it's an elective that, they need to fill in the space or whatever. So, that's been nice. I don't remember. I feel like there was another question, and I don't remember what it was.
Well, you kind of answered one of them, because you briefly mentioned the other deaconess students that are in your class. You were saying that all the other students in your classes, for the most part, there's a means to the end, that they're here for church work certification, something that you've already obtained. And so, yeah, that you kind of, that the shape of your experience in the classroom seems to be slightly different, but that you've at least recognized already. And I lean into that a little bit more. And so, since you're not here to obtain certification, rather just a degree, not just a degree, a graduate level degree that could open up other avenues. You talked about writing and things like that. Not that they're necessary, but of course this helps. What has that been like?
Yeah. So it's been an interesting dynamic because I feel very much like I'm on the same page. I'm in class. I'm alongside Deaconess students. But I've also kind of inserted myself into their lives as like a big sister. So, when I can, I try to have the Deaconess students over to our house, for example, once a week to have devotional time together as sisters in Christ. And I just think, there's something is not quite describable about the bond that we have as sisters in Christ, not even whether they end up becoming deaconesses or not. Part of being in the crucible together, and coming out one shape or another on the other side. And so it's just been an interesting dynamic in that way, because I feel like I'm struggling and pouring my heart into all kinds of different things, just like they are with school. And yet they at times also, make comments about looking up to me and asking me questions, even though I'm in the same class, as if I know the answer, which, I don't.
But I think, having that common student camaraderie is it's something that I think our students regularly identify as a really important part of being at seminary and going through a theological curriculum together. So,
yeah, I think one of the most underrated things is brotherly and sisterly consolation. And the part we play as being the body of Christ and being the church as the royal priesthood of all believers to one another.
Yeah, Luther said it was almost a sacrament, right? I'm also interested in, so you graduate from Concordia Chicago, and now you're in the MA program. Fill in the years in between. We know, and we've talked about on the podcast, that a deaconess can do lots of different things. And so what did it look like for you to live out your faith and to live it out particularly with the skills of a deaconess in what you did in between Concordia Chicago and starting this program here at the seminary?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a whole lot that happened in that. I'm like, how do we squish it down? A lot of it had to do with following this guy around with him being in seminary.
Yeah.
But our first year of marriage was my internship. So I did my internship at Christ Our Savior in Freeburg, Illinois, just across the river. And they had me split between doing campus ministry to community college, which was not really recorded thus far within the LCMS, doing community outreach, and then women's ministry within the church. And so that kind of bloomed into its own directions that maybe they didn't necessarily think of in the initially when taking me on as an intern. But Pastor Caseman is the pastor there, and I mean, he's in my top faves.
Yeah. Shout out to Pastor Caseman.
Yeah.
He's a great supporter of the seminary. He's on our board of regents. He leads our enrollment committee and has just been tremendously supportive of me and Micah, and I know that you both are very close to him. So
yeah,
that's awesome.
On that internship, I started visiting a woman at a care center that specialized in schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And I was the kind of constant for the residents. I was there every week, and they knew me as the Bible lady because I wore my Concordia Deaconess Conference uniform. And for those who are not familiar with that, that's when you see the blue with the gold cross, the gold insignia. That's specific to the Concordia Deaconess Conference. And so I was the Bible lady. And then we ended up actually setting up a Bible study for the residents. And so we would meet in the lunch room for 30 minutes going over a story from the Bible, and then we would have visitation time afterwards. And then I also did women's Bible studies and women's retreats, and was at the community college every week, asking people how I can pray for them, leading college students in Bible studies. So I was pretty busy.
Yeah, sounds like
a huge range of different things. And then after that, we went on vicarage. No, I'm sorry. We went to England. See, there's so much. Where we had Johnny, and then vicarage. So I didn't serve as a deaconess there, but I did go through clinical pastoral education Unit 1 in Alabama. It was a very interesting experience, wonderful people in my class. And then when we came back to St. Louis, I then accepted a call part-time back with Christ Our Savior, continuing on the campus ministry that I had started at Southwestern Illinois College. So I continued to care for the students, and then became pregnant with our third child. So I decided to request peaceful release from the call. And then, once David was born and, a little bit older, I was willing to take a call again. I became the admissions director at a Lutheran school. And so I actually served between two schools over the last 5 years as an admissions director. And which it sounds like, okay, well, anyone can be an admissions director. But I like to think that as a deaconess, I brought a different touch to it, recognizing that anyone coming through the door looking for a school is looking for a reason. Something has happened either to themselves when they were a child and they want a specific educational setting for their own child, or to their child in the school setting that they're currently in. And understanding that you need to hear the story and to meet people where they are, to understand how you can care for them. And in this instance, by providing their child with the education that they need. And more often than not, it was also came with spiritual concerns that needed to be addressed, or, mental health, and guiding them towards local resources.
That's awesome. I think so much when people think of pastors, they think, well, preaching and visiting the sick, maybe teaching Bible study, and there's kind of a cookie cutter, although we know that even pastors really aren't in cookie cutter positions. There's lots of, but deaconesses can take just about whatever task they're given to do and then add this theological perspective, a trained theological perspective, and this a special care for human beings, and take that value and add it to just about any huge variety of vocations. I think that's exciting. There's probably a lot more freedom in how deaconesses serve the church, because we don't have this the church doesn't have a cookie cutter, you must do these 3 things or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, do we have another 3 hours? I could go into my rant that I have, or soapbox, but
come on, let's hear it. I want to hear the Dorothy Glenn rant.
I mean, okay, so one of the biggest, I don't want to say issues, because it's not but I guess blind spot. One of the biggest blind spots I think we have as a church is what it means to live as Christians in our daily lives, and what it means to be a community. Now, that is absolutely fed and shepherded. Is that shepherded?
Sure. Yeah.
By the pastor, by the public office, but that's not the end-all, be-all. And as a woman, I am free now to not have to do those pastoral duties, but to cater to and to hone in on the community aspect of things, so that we can guide people to word and sacrament where we know God to be, provided by the public office. And that looks different depending on the context, and it can be a wide variety, just like you were saying. I mean, it opens up so many doors when you don't try and stick church in a box and say, this is what this looks like, and this is where it is, and this is what the pastor is, and that's it. This box is it. Not that we continue to live our daily lives as Christians, overflowing with His love for us in all that we say and do. And if church is not, if we are not that, then we can see the reason why numbers are declining, why people aren't coming to church. I mean, if you don't understand that God is for you and that you are a part of something, not just because you're going to the place, but because you are the church, and being able to help people understand that and build that community through works of mercy, teaching the faith, and spiritual care.
I'm glad that was a really short rant, but I think I could listen to that for a long time. There's a lot of wisdom there, and there's what I love about it is there's this passionate call to the church to think about what we're doing, and to be more thoughtful, and that comes from your theological training. It comes from your experience in the church. The voice of the deaconess is something that we need in our church body. So good.
I'm looking at time. One question that might intrigue people, and then this will probably be the last question before we get to the latter part of the podcast. But you're a deaconess, I'm a pastor, we're married, both church workers. Because I can answer it from what it's been like for me, and I think I've said some of that, mostly benefits professionally, because again, all of the skill set that deaconesses have, all the freedom that you've had to walk alongside me in ministry, whether it be, hey, I'm in my office in Ferguson, this woman just came by. It feels like there was a major gap between the two of us. I gave her your contact information. Is that okay? And then you have a conversation with them, and you're able to fill in all these gaps to where I don't need to come back and say like, hey, why didn't you say that? But like now I can be not a hero, but I can come in and say, hey, like, can I help you this way? I have this resource. Can I get you plugged in? But like you were able to fill in gaps that simply weren't available to me, namely because of biology, but also because of skill set as well. But reverse that, you're the deaconess married to a pastor. What is that like from your end of things? You're not the only deaconess married to a pastor, of course, but it certainly has a certain dynamic, and it's going to be different from person to person, but there's probably some similarities across the board that somebody listening might find helpful.
Sure. I want to preface with, when we met, you were not planning on being a pastor.
This is very true.
It was not like, oh, I'm going to get my MRS to a pastor.
Nah.
So I guess it just happened.
Yeah, I was kind of 1 foot into church work when Dorothy and I first met.
He was going to be a brilliant chemist, and then I don't know, the church got a hold of him, right?
I appreciate you calling me a brilliant chemist.
I said you were going to be a brilliant chemist.
I heard what I heard. I'm going to let it soak in.
Yeah, I mean, there are its own struggles, obviously, with making sure that you have appropriate boundaries. But I think, honestly, as a pastor's wife, in general in life, because I'm not currently serving as a deaconess, that is going to be a struggle no matter what. And so it's just important to have those boundaries in place and to communicate with one another what is and is not appropriate in terms of time away from family, of priorities, things like that. What you do or do not ask of each other to give of yourself. That can sometimes be a little bit tricky with being a deaconess married to a pastor, because my heart and soul wants to go into every aspect of the church work. I'm kind of an all or nothing person, which gets me in trouble in terms of having time for stuff. But it works really well when it comes to when I was actually within a parish setting, kind of what Micah was talking about, where I have an example of a mom who was choosing between whether or not she should have her electricity turned off or her water, because she could only afford one of those, and so being able to then connect her with the greater church body and the resources available at the Urban League of St. Louis and with Micah in Ferguson, being able to have that give and take and have the time to sit with someone who needed to learn about how she can get health insurance, and just sit with her in the office at the Urban League. But, I had that resource because of the give and take with Micah. And, I think, at least, maybe this is kind of blowing my own head up a little bit here too, but at least for him, even though I'm not serving in a diaconal position right now, I bring that into our marriage, into, that gray area where he does need to talk about something, or, he needs a little bit of help, correction on the way he just did his sermon.
Yes.
I won't have it.
Or how he's dealing with his supervisor that's just unbearable sometimes.
Only because you brought up this last time, there's a million ways to preach. And I did a very circular illustration where I kept bringing the same illustration back to the forefront. And she could not stand it. She was like, that could have been like half. You did it so many times. Why? And there were major reasons why. It was a part of a thematic series we had been doing, and it was kind of coming to a pinnacle on the trials of Jesus leading up to his crucifixion. We did it during Lent. And somebody else in the congregation said it was their favorite sermon, so that's all I needed to hear.
Probably could have cut like 7 minutes out.
Yeah, see, here we go. Anyway.
Could we just, could you guys record some of these conversations that you have, like in the off hours, and then we can splice them in to this podcast? I think that would be really a lot of fun. Our listeners and viewers would really appreciate that. Yeah. Leave a comment in the comments below if you think that'd be a good idea.
Yeah. Anyway. Sometimes, he might ask about something, and I'll give a response and say, I never would have thought of it that way, about ministry towards a certain person or, disposition, just looking at empathy and listening to people. It blew my mind when I was an admissions director and I'd have a family in there and they would just be sobbing because no one spent the time to just listen to their story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so easy in our world for everybody to just kind of be business as usual and to get stuff done and keep on going and to have somebody that would stop and listen.
Yeah. I think we live in a society where everyone is commoditized.
Yeah. Yeah.
What can I get from you? How can you serve me? And how can I consume from you?
A lot of wisdom.
Yeah. And because you're my direct supervisor with the travel schedule, that's just necessary for recruiting new prospective students, having somebody who understood that. When I first accepted this call into enrollment, I was blessed to have a wife who had been doing it different level, different scale, but same principles. Like, all right, you're looking for families for your school. Where are the places in the community you're looking at? And then it was like one of these things where she was like going to all these random places. It's like, that's interesting. So we started thinking about the random places that make sense for us, and it's bearing fruit.
For sure.
So it's for me, again, now that Dorothy is on and listening, I say it all the time. It's like you have to be, the boundaries are there, and you have to have a certain level of understanding. We're both called church workers. And this is for teachers, this is for pastor deaconesses, no matter the combination you put together, is that at some point, just for the sake of being a family, somebody's call is going to end up taking a priority. And if you're at a point in your career and you're a pastor and you're able to step away and let your deaconess wife have the call priority, that's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm sure people would like, well, hold up a second. But I think that's a husband and wife decision, not a societal decision that people have to make. And so I've been blessed because now, she's, like she said, I don't think studying in Cambridge was a hard decision for you to go along with. You're from there. It was nice. Huntsville, back to St. Louis, call to Ferguson, call to Lutheran Hour, call to here. But having somebody alongside that understands that process from a church perspective, not just a family and life dynamic, but then also understanding the necessities of it. I took a long time to accept this call. We had conversations back and forth, and I had no intention of taking as long as I did, but it's because we were having these conversations. But having somebody that would understand the stuff that goes through the call process. Again, it's not just moving your family. It's this weird dynamic where your profession and your faith overlap. And what does that mean for your personal faith, for the greater church? Well, and now the seminary is stuck with the Glenns. No intention. You can say it on the podcast officially. I've said it before that your response to anybody who sends me an email or calls and says, "Are you open to a call?" is that you've unpacked the china.
Yeah, it is actually.
So
yeah.
so now it's on record, not just for me. I'm not just saying it. That is Dorothy's response. And again, it's one of those things, dynamics, right? I can't control the future. The Holy Spirit is going to work the way He wills. But when I accepted the call, I made as much of a commitment as you can in these scenarios to you. But I made, I think, a much deeper commitment to Dorothy, especially when we decided to sell our house and move on campus. And she's like, okay, if we do this, this is where you're going to be called. And again, you can't control these things, right? But when people come asking, I tell them all the time, sans the voice of God ripping open the heavens and saying, Micah, this is the call you have to accept. I'm at the seminary. We love being here.
Well, and we're blessed by that. And I want to especially say thank you to you, because every time Micah goes on a trip, or every time Micah is pulled away to do this, that, or the other thing, or his head is in work because we're struggling with and working on some big challenge, thank you for letting him be here. And I'm grateful for your family being on campus and everything that you add to the seminary community. So huge thank you to you for bringing Micah all this wisdom and your experience in the admissions world. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we should do Ripe for the Picking.
Yep.
And I'll go first. I have a couple that are particular for Dorothy Glenn. I'm not sure that I know the answer to these. So the first one has to do with your English background. So I did my PhD in Birmingham, so I have a love for a lot of British things. British beer. So I'm thinking like extra special bitter, something that's you kind of have to hand pump. The little bit flatter than American beer, not so carbonated, and maybe served a little bit warmer than American beer is typically served. What's your take on British beer, or even like a Scotch ale, wee heavy? What's your take? Is it ripe for the picking or leave it on the tree?
I really want to say that it's ripe for the picking, but it's leave it on the tree.
All right.
I can't handle beer. There's something about it, and I think English is better, if that's the question.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's good.
But I think it's also the carbonation or something. When it hits my stomach, it does not last very long internally. So.
Well, it's definitely ripe for the picking for me. I love British beer, extra special bitter, Scotch ale, wee heavy, a nice brown. These are my favorite beers. So yeah, it's and I actually don't mind that it's a little bit warmer. I don't mind that it's a little bit less effervescent. I really like English style beers.
British beers are ripe for the picking. Listeners and viewers all know that I don't drink a ton, but like I think for Americans going to England, there are a lot of culture switches, and room temperature beverages is one of those things. Like once you get used to it, I think it just is just the way it is. But like ice cold beverages is very American.
Yeah, and I think it's hard on your system. I don't like ice cold water. Germans call it Kellerkalt, so it's the cold from the basement. Basement cold is basically the temperature that they serve their beer at.
But like if you're American and you're into like all these microbrews, like the interesting thing is there are some brand name beers in the UK, but like most pub houses, they have their own
Yeah,
beer.
they were doing craft brew way
Like,
before craft brew was cool in America.
And so pub to pub, if you just order like the ale or the what's another
lager,
a lager or something like that, it's gonna be like the house one. And they're nice. They have their own little typically bitter taste, but not everything British is better, but it's a nice difference. I'll say that. Not
Almost
better.
everything.
Whatever. Not true. All right, here we go. And I think I've asked this one before, and I'm confident I know the answer. This is a tricky thing because usually we don't know how somebody's going to respond, but maybe you'll surprise me. I don't think so. Right for the picking or leave it on the tree. Fruitcake.
What do you think my answer is?
Ooh, this is good. This is like
But why'd you say it like that, though?
that like wedding show.
So when I say fruitcake, I'm thinking of like Christmas pudding. I mean, regardless of what you say, I'll just say mine first. Is leave it on the tree. But I think that's yours.
Leave that on the tree.
Now, okay, so tell me the difference between, I know what a fruit cake is with like all these maraschino cherries and maybe some orange peel and some nuts and very, very dense, lots of stuff in there. What's the difference between that and Christmas pudding?
Isn't one wrapped and buried so that it can ferment?
Yeah. So a Christmas pudding is typically fermented and often soaked in like brandy or something like that. So it's moister, but only because it's
ripe for the picking. That sounds amazing. I love just regular fruitcake.
Yeah.
But there's not much that I don't love.
Well, that's not true.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
Nando's chicken.
I could get somebody on my side with this Nando's thing. Hey, we'll just move right along past that one.
I'm going to have
Nando's, after I gave birth to Johnny. That was the first thing that we ate was Nando's.
See?
And where was it from? Not from Chicago.
No, this is in Cambridge.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah. Nando's, like I will say this again, Nando's in England is radically different than the Nando's in America. But the Nando's in Washington, D.C., at least when we went, was very nostalgic. Not one for one, but it was like, oh, yeah, this is Nando's. Every time in Chicago, it's kind of, and we've been to Nando's together in Chicago, it's kind of.
Maybe you like Nando's because it has a specific memory attached to it.
Nah, dog.
Because it's just chicken with some almost tasteless sauce.
The very first time I went, I won't have it. The very first time I went to England, and we're talking about Nando's off of fruitcake. We had just been engaged, and I was only there for like the week. And her brother David took us to Nando's. It's been dynamite ever since. It's so good, man.
I'm gonna have to search out a Christmas pudding.
Yeah, you could probably get a recipe. Or we can have
fermented.
1 cent.
Sounds just amazing. I love fermented things. So, and I fermented a lot of stuff.
Fruitcake is
all
gross.
right. I know. What Micah's answer is to this, but I don't know if I know yours. Rap music. Ripe for the picking? Leave it on the tree. Do you like rap?
It's ripe for the picking.
All right.
It's not my go-to, but
Okay.
I do listen to it. Yeah. My go-to is normally, like indie, 90s British stuff. Yeah.
So, indie British 90s stuff. Give us some bands.
Okay, well, my favorite one, which Micah likes to say is not my favorite one,
Because it's not.
is Ocean Color Scene.
Never heard.
And then, but also like Radiohead and those bands like that, Oasis. They're all 90s
Yeah.
bands.
My
that
favorite
love
band is actually
Radiohead.
Kaiser Chiefs, but anyway.
Don't know them either.
I only know them because of Dorothy. I mean, yeah, you already said rap music is like my go-to. Like if my playlist on music, like I have different ones in the top music playlist. So that's the one. It's almost exclusively rap and hip hop. Yeah, it's just. I like rock and roll and stuff like that too. But
we were giving Micah a hard time the other day about not knowing a Johnny Cash song, like couldn't name a Johnny Cash song, and he had a really good comeback. He said, "Can you name?" I don't remember. I'm probably going to get it wrong, but I think you said like, "Do you know an Ice-T song or
I probably didn't
or
say
Jay-Z.
Jay-Z is probably
Yeah.
who I said.
And we were all like, nope. Fair enough.
There we go.
I like rap music. It's right for the picking for me. I would say that I probably have not listened to lots of it. But yeah, I grew up in the 80s when rap music was making its way into suburban
Pop culture.
culture. Yeah.
Eventually.
Yeah.
It had its ups and downs, late 80s, early 90s. It struggled with society a little bit, but here we are. Now we have Katy Perry and Taylor Swift have hip-hop artists on their songs, so we made it.
Yeah, there you go. I suppose if that's your definition of making it.
Oh, man. Anyway.
I think it's actually a quintessential American music.
100%. I mean, it's cultural commentary. A lot. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is cultural commentary, no matter how it comes out and the language that's used and things like that. But I mean, talking about psychology, like you could probably do a whole dissertation on the psychology behind rap music. I'm sure somebody has. Probably.
My brother actually wrote a chapter of his dissertation for Cornell on rap music, and he's an anthropologist, and he was interested in a particular demographic of people that were struggling with some particular things in Germany. That's where he wrote did his field work, and he recognized just in talking with this group of people that American rap was a really important part of their German experience. And so, there's been a ton of stuff written on rap music and how it is very much a cultural commentary.
Oh, and then you're talking about how the way that international people experience it as well is also very interesting and what they pick up from it. I'm not going to talk about Elsa. One of our students used a word in an Instagram post, and it made me chuckle. And I said, because she was like very into hip hop, I was like, I understand why you said that based upon the music you listen to. You can't say that. Anyway, and I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. All right, here we go. Back to what we're doing here. Right for the picking or leave it on the tree. I actually, again, I think I know, but this one actually, maybe not. Starbucks refreshers. The drinks.
Refreshers?
Yeah. So not like a mocha, a nice mocha, but like the refresher drinks. It's the ones that are like strawberry teas or whatever else like that.
Yeah, you know what? They're ripe for the picking. Nadia has been getting some of those. Our exchange daughter, she gets the strawberry acai or something like that. They're really good.
Okay.
Yeah. Refreshing if you don't want to caffeinate up.
I'd say leave it on the tree for me. I don't go to Starbucks very often. I suppose if I was at a coffee shop and I needed to get something and it was during the day, I have my 2 cups of coffee in the morning that I make, and no more, no less. Any more caffeine just messes with me. So I would get sparkling water or Perrier or something.
Sure. I can have caffeine right before I go to bed, and it make no difference almost. Whatever that says. But yeah, they're actually kind of like leave it on the tree for me. They don't taste bad. But like you said, strawberry acai, I have tried to enjoy things that are acai and stuff like that. But it's just if you're a vegan, I'm sorry. It's just not a lifestyle that I ever want to try for myself. And I'm not saying like if you eat acai, you're a vegan. But I'm not saying if you eat or drink acai that you're a vegan. Yeah, if I'm at a coffee shop and I have the option, and I want something cold, not hot, it'll probably be a cold coffee or just a water. I've kind of, with the exception of lemonades and road trip sodas, it's like coffee and water or tea for me most days. But I prefer hot drinks or at least for now. They're nice, even when it's hot outside. Not to sit outside with a hot drink. That's unbearable. But anyway. All right. There we go. Now I know. I'll never get you one. Not that I ever have, but.
All right. So switching gears away from food a little bit, but kind of going back to a British question. Ripe for the picking or leave it on the tree, Charles Dickens as an author. And Christmas Carol is maybe in particular, but just any Dickens book.
I'd say ripe for the picking.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan. He's kind of that group that have a lot of just commentary on the social time.
Yeah.
But also then kind of bringing in a lot of, looking at the moral of life and, you could say that kind of, looking at the motifs of what it means to live a Christian life. And, it's not my favorite genre. I'm, again, a weird nerd, and I do tend to lean towards more the like fantasy or stuff that uses magical realism. But my favorite author is a Japanese guy, Haruki Murakami. But Charles Dickens is still a good read.
Yeah. What's your favorite author's name again?
Haruki Murakami.
What has he written?
So the book that I found the most intriguing was called After Dark. And it's basically, there's like, spoiler alert, it's just one evening in a cafe, like a diner, between two people, and then there's also something else happening. And there's a lot of imagery of like depression and looking at kind of this conversation between these two strangers. That's as much as I'll go into it, so in case people want to read it.
Awesome. I'll have to dig that up. We like fantasy in our house too. Dickens for me is ripe for the picking. I read a couple of his books. I don't know, over the years, Hard Times, and for years I read Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol around Christmas time, just as I don't know, I almost find it devotional because of the social commentary, and he's really good at kind of getting into the heart. He reminds me a little bit of George MacDonald, who I also really like. So yeah, right for the picking for me.
Yeah, same. I like Charles Dickens. I mean, it's like one of those things where like, if Charles Dickens is Leave It on the Tree for you, I think that says a lot about you. He's just kind of like, he's just kind of one of the guys. Yeah. Like he's just kind of on that upper echelon of authors, and even if you don't know all of his works, you know his works because they're everywhere, and they've been made into pop culture and things like that. So that he's just one of those guys. He's solid.
Also a big Roald Dahl fan. I don't know why it's not more in American schools, but
yeah. My one of my kids was in a showing, I think, of Matilda, or maybe we just went to see it. If my wife is listening, I'm sure that she'll remember, and I probably got it wrong. But we've seen Matilda. We like that. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is a Roald Dahl, right?
Yeah. The
Yeah.
BFG.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. They're all good stuff. And if you're a Willy Wonka fan, you should go and see the original inspiration, which is the Cadbury's Factory, which is
I've
remarkable.
been on that, but I didn't see any Oompa Loompas.
No, they keep them behind closed doors, not just messing around. Yeah. Last one, right? You went first. Again, I didn't think about this before we did it. I was like, well, what do I ask? And my list just isn't Dorothy proof, I should say. So I know the answer to this. I think I've asked somebody before, but it's a good one. Right for the picking or leave it on the tree. Riding the train.
Like, just to ride it, or?
Oh, I mean, if that's, why not?
Yeah, I mean, it's ripe for the picking. When you get to a place and you don't have to drive there, you can just hang out or eat or, yeah. watch the countryside go by.
Right. Yeah, it's ripe for the picking for me too. We're going to Europe this summer, and I'm like, why do we want to get a car? Because I know who's going to have to drive.
Right. Exactly.
And I like being able to read a book or take a nap in the train. And I've always had good experience being on trains in Europe. I've had no good experiences of being on the train in America, actually. I haven't ridden the train very often in America, but I'm not a huge Amtrak fan.
Yeah, and that's one of those things. So like again, I'm kind of like you in America. I've taken Amtrak, and it's always one of these things where like you compare train tickets to plane tickets, and plane tickets are quite often, with rare exception, less expensive, and the train scheduling and stuff like that. For some reason, we just never, like, we have all these Westerny movies where they're building the trains. It's like, well, they built all these trains. Where do they go? And where are they? Anyway, but like in England, it's like quite the opposite. You can get a train literally to places like Blakedown. If you've never been to Blakedown, I don't know why you would go, but shout out Blakedown. I've been there for a good like hour wandering around trying to get a taxi out. But yeah, I love taking the train. And I fell in love with it in England because it's the same thing. You grow up in America, you don't really take it.
Yep.
But we didn't own a car, and that never stopped us from our wildest adventures. So now, like, yeah, when I go to England, people are like, well, people would be like, well, how do I get to Cambridge from London? I'm like, oh, take this train to this station, and they'll have like a direct train or close to a direct train.
You go through King's Cross and you see platform 9 3/4.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah. It might be intimidating at first, but once you've taken it a couple of times, you're like, oh, like, yeah, I'm so glad I didn't rent a car.
Right.
And you're going to get out. You want to walk around anyway. You see countryside. And you get to see places of the country that only the train kind of goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's nice that way. Anyway, well, we let that right for the pick and under or leave it on the tree go in a variety of different ways. But yeah, I live with you, so I get to see you all the time. But one thing we've begun asking our guests to do, if you had one piece of advice to give a listener who's thinking about becoming a church worker, or maybe is a church worker with a bachelor's degree and has thought about maybe getting an advanced degree in theology, what would that piece of advice be?
I think it would be to leave yourself open. I think so many times we can fill our plates with reasons not to do something, and there will always be a reason to not do something if we, look hard enough. And so just letting yourself be open to seeing that maybe there is a door opening that you didn't see before. There
you go.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
I've never heard that advice in all the podcasts that we've been doing.
Yep. Look at that.
That's good. I like it.
Yeah, same. I like it a lot. Anyway, we won't make this too uncomfortable for you guys. As always, Dorothy, thank you for joining us on the podcast. I'm sure this satisfied some listeners getting to meet one of our other halves now at some point. The ball's in Ben's on.
In my
the ball is in Ben's court.
Yep.
To have Selena on, which will be a different podcast episode, I'm sure. But it'll be great, and you'll get to meet Selena and to hear her side and her take on things. And as always, if you're listening and you're thinking about becoming a church worker, leave yourself open to the possibilities. And one of the ways to begin to explore is a link to our request for information will be in the description. Excuse me. Click on that link so we know who you are and where you are and how to contact you. I just got a little indigestion real quick. Anyway, most inopportune time ever. And if you yourself are thinking about becoming a church worker, as always, don't think too hard. Fill out the request for information. The conversation is free. It's non-committal. You're not signing yourself up to say this is exactly what I'm going to do, but it's, again, leaving yourself open to the possibility. And if you fill it out, there's always an opportunity to say, don't call me anymore, but I don't think that'll be the case. Anyway, and then also Vocatio registration is still open. Link for that is still there. We still have a few spots left. So if you have some youth in your congregation and you're thinking about it, fill the form out quick and grab one of those spots. Free to attend still this year. And it's going to be a great program, great time. And I'm really excited to we're getting closer and closer to those dates. I love Vocatio. It's such a great time. So yeah, as always, click the links, fill out the RFI, sign up for Vocatio, and thank you for joining us under the fig tree. See you next time.